gotta be kidding me.
I don't want them each to have.
Training is,
Board members, yes, but.
it's an operating
I'm sitting on the end.
venue, right? It's in good
What are you
shape.
doing, playing on a quick 9 after hours?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Go out on top. Don't go out on
Later
top.
that.
What was the question? Out of 90.
Huh?
You guys have a good trip?
For you.
We did that, we, a couple of.
Tell Mac I said hi, welcome home. He missed a good Scotch gathering on Saturday.
Well,
Not taking
we were gathering, no, I don't wanna be there.
You don't wanna be able to.
I think we can,
I get to really stick between two knowledgeable fellows like yourselves.
Boy. Me moving.
I figure you guys can protect me and keep me quiet.
Likely.
You can keep me quiet.
Yeah, right. I don't think so.
You can rein me in. You
I
can
don't think so.
start the discussion.
You're the new voice, you know.
So we start down. Pardon me?
You're the new voice. We've done our 4 years.
Yes, we've done.
We're waiting for somebody else to take over.
I did about 7 years.
I know you
previously,
did.
So
I like that rejuvenation you got.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
No,
Okay, good. Oh, all right, then I'll hold off. Okay, we're set to go, but not set because
Well, we're,
Paula has left to get
that's what
warm weather or cold weather here.
I should have asked her to get candy.
She's not going that far.
Yes, you should have.
she just went to her
Where's the
car
candy?
to kind of get warm.
And Colin's here in shorts and a t-shirt.
We ought to get dinner somehow.
I hope you're hardy. Here, right here's good. I hope you're hardy because it's chilly in here.
Yeah, well, keep me awake,
It
hopefully.
doesn't bother you, it sure doesn't bother me.
Shoot, I didn't go to camp.
I've got a,
I can grab one of my
I actually
All right,
I
no
left
problem.
mine.
oh, have you? Okay.
doodle.
Yeah, I have one.
I'm on my way out
I
anyway.
have pens and pencils. That's not what
Clocks are all over the place.
It's actually 6:32,
No,
so we
My
should be
phone says
starting
6:36.
soon.
Oh, good. I've got reinforcements on either side of me to keep me quiet.
Message, no response.
Not over here.
I'll
Share some
You go up.
space, sorry.
I haven't had a chance.
Really short in this chair. So August.
So before we get started, I wanted to let everybody know we have microphones now,
No.
and there is no actual PA system in here. This is all for the video recording that we put up on YouTube.
In other words,
So
they won't hear us
we could
better.
Have it pointed at your mouths.
Here,
Shut
Benny.
it off.
Nope. That's been a problem in the past.
Wow, look at that. Oh, my goodness.
Is it time? Are we recording?
Okay.
My wife doesn't.
Recording, okay. All right, it is 6:33. We will call the meeting to order. Everybody's here tonight. Oh, lovely. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you. Are there any items that anyone wants to add to the agenda, take away? Yes, sir.
Just a quick, very, very quick item after we do roll call.
Okay.
I want to do just a quick discussion on golf numbers.
You mean after adoption of agenda, which
Yes,
we're in
ma'am.
already? Okay. All right, so the next item above that is going to be golf members?
Golf numbers.
Golf members.
Numbers.
Oh, numbers,
Golf
good.
finances.
We're here at the finance meeting, it should be. Yep, okay. So we'll call that whatever.
3.5.
All right, yeah, 3A, whatever. Okay, and then, anything else? All right, then we shall move on. There were no minutes. I'm going to make, before you do that, I'm going to make a quick announcement because apparently a lot of questions have been going on. I know this is an exciting time because we're getting the budget. I don't have a lot of copies yet, and the Finance Committee's not reviewed it yet, so what we're going to do is pass some out once we see how many board members are coming, because we have enough of the board members. If some don't show up, we will pass some additional ones out for you all to review. But understand, these are drafts. This is like the first cut. We haven't really done a lot with it, so I don't want you to look at this and say, oh my gosh, I got to go tell my friend that we're going to charge this amount of money for it. No one's made that decision. That's a board decision. We will make some recommendations. And that won't happen till probably mid-September. So lots of work has to be done in the meantime, but this gives us a starting amount. And Ashley, if you'll kind of monitor, and maybe about 10 minutes from now, as we start the budget discussion, you can pass some of those out, okay? All right, you are on, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Last week, we posted a statement online about the general manager stepping down. And when we did that, a comment was made about golf revenue. And it was refuted by a member of the board. And so we ran a report, and I'm looking at a report comparing 2017 to 2018 golf expenses. And the revenue difference at this at June was 61,509 plus, and there was a $10,071 bad debt expense because Western Washington had not paid at that time. So our actual was $71,600. But revenue difference up from last year is 70%, and net difference from last year is 321% better. All right?
Good.
So, don't know where those other numbers came from, but we ran a report, and it's very, very clear what we're doing in the golf department, and it's doing very, very well.
That was for, wait, I'm sorry, that was for 1 month or for year to
No,
date?
that's year-to-date in June.
Well, that would be very nice.
Well, no, but I mean, you said the golf revenue is up 320%?
From the year before, in June, it
For the
was-
month of June, it was up 320%?
Good.
The net of golf revenues minus expenses is up 321%. In June 2017, we had year-to-date a running loss of negative 24,000. And then year-to-date this year, we have a positive $11,084 net in golf.
So from a deficit of 24,000 to a surplus of 11,000 year
Yeah.
to date.
Year-to-date through June. And then revenue, gross revenue, we're up 70,000, well, 61,600. And then net revenue, we're up 61,509.
Okay.
So, there was no mistake in what was said. I mean, golf is doing quite well, so I'm sorry that someone went online and said those numbers weren't true.
Thanks for bringing us the update, that's awesome. Okay. Okay, so tonight we're going to do, do a real review of the 2019 draft budget. So, and just, if you'll hold back at least a couple copies for board members, and I think you can hand them out then to the group.
Question first.
Yes.
Since we're gonna have the, members of the board here, and Jennifer went through a lot of this, and it's a lot of material.
It is.
I'd like to ask that the questions actually be held to the finance committee. This is an introduction to the board, but questions to the finance, otherwise we won't get out of here till.
Yeah. And we'll allow some member questions and comments at the end, but we'll limit that as well in case it gets over.
Thank you, ma'am.
Over the top, yeah, okay. All right, so do you want to explain to us, first of all, you have the draft of the, I do with it. No, I have my draft copy. No? Oh, here it is. It's in my book. Okay, so last week we were handed this draft copy, but this is now updated. So Jennifer will go through that with us and explain what that is about, and then she'll also go over this additional component. Yes? I'm ready, Jennifer. Go.
Great. So, before you, you have a copy of the 2019 budget discussion, the proposed integrated 2019 budget. I gave you this draft last week to discuss, and so today we're going to be going over a briefer set of documents as we had the full presentation last week. The budget is based on baseline funding to meet the requirements of the reserve study. And as you know, baseline funding says that over a 30-year period, we're going to have $0 left to spend.
Quick question about the baseline funding model. My understanding of the baseline funding model was you would have zero at the end of each year.
It's at the end of the 30-year period. So it funds the current year plus enough extra, so at the end of the 30-year period in the reserve study, you have 0 in your reserves.
Thanks.
That's the goal. However, we're so far behind in SURF that we can't actually get there in the 30-year period. And then full funding says that at the end of the 30-year period, you could fund it all again. You're at 100% funding. So
Say that one last
at
one.
the end of a 30-year period, your reserves are 100% funded, so you could fund everything again. You could fund the next 30 years.
You've built up enough extra cash, you've already taken care of everything, and now you can keep funding
You
it.
can keep funding it. You can fund the next year and the next year and the next year. Whereas baseline says that at the end of the 30-year period, you have nothing to start from.
Sorry. Right.
You're at 0.
I got it, yeah.
So baseline is more affordable because you have a goal of 0 at the end. The 2019 budget has 4 components: surf, roads, mailbox, and operations. The entire 2019 budget is based on the premise that the 2019 budget will match the existing reserve study. We have identified items that don't exist in the current reserve study, and those need to be stated in the ballot measure. The 2018 reserve study is not in compliant with the WCOA law, and that's because there's a particular wording that's not verbatim in the law, and it doesn't say how much the deficit or surplus is, by member that each member owes. And that will be integrated into our 2019 reserve study. And we'll print one consolidated baseline schedule. Tonight, I'm hoping that we can discuss here at Finance what the proposed collections rate should be for budgeting for next year. Given increases in dues, I think it should be 91%. What to include or not include in the operations budget. And then from last week to this week, I have prepared for us 2 different options of what we could do with dues. I was asked to answer that mail and prepare a couple of options. So that's what's before you tonight. Any questions so far?
Can I just ask about the baseline again, the baseline funding? Because this is one that I think is confusing for a lot of us, for me. This is a rolling 30 years, right? So every year we're looking at a 30-year plan.
That's correct.
So I think it's back to your question is like, how do you get there? How do you know that? It doesn't seem like it's just simple math to get to 30 years from now, we're gonna have $0 in our, if I understand it, we're gonna have $0. We're gonna have fixed everything, as I understand it. But we're not gonna have anything in reserve, so whatever we wanna do from there on, we'll need more money.
That's correct.
So, but how does that really impact how does it really impact this year that we're going into to know, are we funding everything for this year? And then also gathering some money for future years?
That's correct. You're always funding the current year plus gathering money for future years. So the amount of money that you're gathering for future years in the baseline model is less money than what you're gathering in future years for the fully funded model. The fully funded model says you're gonna have more money at the end, not a $0 amount. So if we're looking at which we should choose as a way to look at a 10-year plan or what's most affordable, I think that the baseline model is more affordable because you don't have anything left after the 30 years. Now, obviously, that, as you said, it updates every year. You're looking at that, but I think that it gives us kind of a lower amount to say this is our goal to be able to fund the current year plus a little bit of extra.
And is there software is that what the reserve study is telling us, is that's the software that they kind of throw all the numbers into and?
Correct. They have a specialized
spits it out.
software and it spits it out. And they're being a reserve consultant is a designation. There's special classes that you take, like there's special classes you take to be a CPA. And so they are specialized reserve consultants, and they have this software that calculates it all and spits it out at the end. We don't have that software.
A reserve consultant is a professional that's his entire job title is to consult on reserves of communities like ours, and create a a million.
There are quite a few assumptions that go into it, and they're all stated in the reserve study, one of which is the rate of inflation. What's the rate of inflation? They use 2.5%. The other is, how much interest do you think you're going to get every year? There's a pretty low amount of interest in the reserve studies, if any.
Because our interest rates are so low right now, we don't know what it's going to do. And then, what are the additional, those are the biggest assumptions.
They tell you what the member contribution should be in order to under baseline fund each year. I mean, it's all laid out in there, but it's one of these up and down things. So this year it's 500,000, so the dues would be, or the assessment would be less. And next year it's $1.5 million, so it's got to be more. And I think one of the things that we want to do is try to create a little predictability for our members. So we'll probably look at something that's more evened out from that. But we can do that over a 30-year, or at least a 10-year period. I don't think 30 years is recommended because 10 years is a long ways out and a lot can change in 10 years. But we can look at the first 10 years and determine on average what kind of funds do we need in order to baseline fund the next 10 years.
My understanding was 30 years was required.
It is. It's required to be in the budget process and to where we stand when we, what our degree of funding is. And that'll be something that Jennifer will add into our budget.
It also requires an on-site evaluation every 3 years and an update every year. So you can do the update in-house or you can bring them in to do it. But we chose 2 years ago to have a complete on-site evaluation also.
So next year, 2019, we'd be doing another onsite, or am I off a year?
20.
No, we did it in 2017 for this year, so it'll be 2 more years.
2 more years.
before we do it.
2020.
To continue my question, my understanding from what I've read from Schwent, who I believe is our reserve consultant, what I've read from him is that zero, the baseline funding method is defined as one that says at the end of each year, you will not drop below zero in that method. And that there are concerns if you have excessive funds in reserve from the baseline method in any particular year through that study. And so that that's my understanding of his writings, and I absolutely could be wrong in my understanding of that, but that's what I have read. And so you're saying that zero at 30 years, and what I've read from Schwent is each individual year, zero.
Let's see. Goal. You're correct in that it can never go negative in any one year, because then you're not funding the current year.
Right.
But my understanding was that at the end of the 30 years, it was to be zero. I think I've got that.
Oh, I agree, at the end of 30 years, zero also, but each year along the way.
Right, so for example, the baseline funding method so roads is a good example. And it says that we're 26% funded in 2018 and 9% funded in 2019, 39% funded in 2020, and then it slowly goes down to 0% in 2047. So that way by 2047 you get to zero, but nowhere along the way will you be negative in your funding schedule. As far as what your annual expenditures are versus how much money you're going to bring in versus how much, what your ending balance is in your reserves. So the projected ending balance in the reserves under the baseline model is supposed to be 0 at the end of the 30-year period.
And that gets adjusted each year.
Every time the reserve study is redone, that gets adjusted and brought, so it's a rolling 30-year outlook.
Okay, Penny still has a question mark on her face, but you have your hand up, so let's respond. Yes, please, Rick.
I think just for point of clarification, so that everybody is clear on the reserve study, besides the baseline and the other. Just a question as to what's in the reserve study? A lot of it is replacing parts and pieces and stuff, and the philosophy is to kind of fix minor components, but not replace buildings and huge things as such. Or could you speak to that just a little bit, of the philosophy of what's used in the reserve study, so everybody's kind of on the same page? And is there any difference between the baseline and the fully funded with regards to those philosophies?
There is no change in regards to the baseline or fully funded to that philosophy. What we have done, given our financial constraints, is put in the replacement of components to buildings on the belief that we would not receive enough funding to replace a building. So you would see in the reserve study, in different buildings, the replacement of the electrical infrastructure of a building, or the plumbing, or the air conditioning. You can put in the replacement of an entire building, which we would recommend don't spend another dime, and we talked about this 2 finance meetings back. With the exception of emergency and code issues, put no more money into this facility, replace this facility. Now, we have not, in past reserve studies, taken such a bold step. But it would be smarter and more economically wise to do that. So if you put if in the next reserve study, we would remove, for example, in the maintenance building, replacing the electrical system or replacing the plumbing system. We would say replace the maintenance building. Out years, 10 years later, you might see an item, replace the roof on the maintenance building, electrical upgrade maintenance building. If the building has a 40-year life cycle, maybe in 40 years you would see replace maintenance building. But up to date now, we have not done that. When we do the next reserve study update for the maintenance building and for this building, that is exactly what we would propose doing.
So the reserve study and the community hasn't taken a hard look, frankly, from an analytical perspective, as to whether it makes sense to fix the electrical in this building or take all of the things for the next 5 years, if you will, out of the reserve study for this building and just do an emergency basis and replace the whole building. Those types of analysis.
No, that would not be true. The reserve analyst actually recommended replace the building when he was here, and he gave a talk. Said you should replace the building. So we can't, or at least at that time, we did not have the wherewithal and the means to do so. So we would now go ahead and advocate that point of view. And so, Finance Committee, would you advocate to say, replace this building on a schedule? And then, Board, do you concur with the Finance Committee, replace this building? Great. The staff, the assets based on their replacement needs, other software being RS means, life cycle means, facility means, schedules that the analyst uses, and they scale out when to replace equipment and buildings. And if that's the wisdom of it, we would put that in. That's how we would actually update the next one. We would remove a lot of the infrastructure Band-Aid repairs and say, replace the building, and then down the road you would see modernization. Did that answer your question?
It's detailed out on page 3 of your packet.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood what we're looking at when we look at a reserve study versus some potential optional analysis, if you will.
Penny, did you solidify your thoughts about additional questions, or?
I'm good for now.
Okay,
Moving forward?
moving forward.
Okay, moving forward, from this week to last week, in the 2 options that are before you on this legal size piece of paper. That's fine. I have removed the additional, from operations, I have removed the additional maintenance staff member and the swing shift security guard from operations. I mean, we could put them back in, but I took them out. And I went ahead, and option 1 is based on the reserve study and the 10-year plans for surf and roads. So in 2019, that will fully fund surf and roads, and it will fund it for our 10-year plans, the dues that are reflected in here from 2019 to 2027.
Okay, let's talk fully funded, baseline fully funded?
Baseline funded, and it will
Okay.
fund our 10-year plans.
Okay,
Okay. So you can see that in 2019, that makes the monthly projected assessment total at 91% collections, $161.52, and in 2027, $183.03. Now, I also put together an option 2, which is to ramp up assessments. This has an unknown impact on the reserve study and the 10-year plan for surf and roads, because a lot of work is going to get deferred and pushed out into future years. And so that's going to take a month of planning at least to figure out what those impacts are, and I don't have them for you today. The 2019 surf and roads will not be fully funded per our 10-year plans. And then just as a reminder that costs to repair always increase every year. So by ramping up the dues, you are deferring and increasing expenses for the future. But that puts the 2019 projection at $124.70 a month, and in 2027, $225.10 a month. And so my goal was to have 2019 dues be lesser, and to have the same amount collected in surf and roads and mailbox over the 10-year period. So you can see the final section at the bottom is the reserve study and the baseline, and how much revenues we estimate that we're going to collect, and the difference between option 1 and option 2 is only $14,000. So more or less, in both options over the same span of time, you're collecting the same amount of money. So it just depends on, timing of expenditures, where you need to get a loan, or, how all that will play out will require much planning. And each of these options collects an additional $7.6 million above the reserve study. And that is because, as we were just previously discussing and on page 3, there are millions of dollars worth of work that is not currently included in our 2018 reserve study and will be added into 2019, including dredging the marina, all of the parking lot repairs.
the list is on page 3 for those of you who want to follow along.
Taking a holistic approach to the buildings for the maintenance building, barn 8, and the interior of the clubhouse. The marina interior stabilization. So those are some of the bigger items on that list, and it's very expensive. I anticipate that next year when we present this reserve study, if we did the same numbers in here, that instead of a $7.6 million, you'd have 0 or possibly even negative. I don't know, because we haven't put all those numbers in.
At the end of 10 years.
At the end of 10 years, correct. So That's why there is that extra at the end, because we know we have these expenses and that they're going to need to be funded, but we don't have time to update the reserve study for this budgeting season and to get it in compliance, and so that will be done next year. If the committee would like me to add back in the maintenance staff member and the swing shift security guard, I'd be more than happy to. You know, it's not for staff to set the dollar amount of the dues. It's our responsibility to tell you how to become compliant. It's the board's responsibility to tell us what those numbers need to be. I don't have anything else to
Nope,
add
that's
to
good.
my presentation.
This came as a result of my discussion with Jennifer that I felt we needed a second option and how could we get there? And she did a great job, I think, of pulling together some alternative ideas. But I want to hear from all of you what your thoughts are on this, because this means, obviously, the two things. The maintenance person will be held off until probably the future year, and we don't know yet whether we're going to need that person or not. The security guard, I asked to hold off for a year as well, and if we absolutely get into a crunch or a situation, we'll have to revisit it at some point next year, but just to try to keep the ops budget low enough that we can meet this under $125 amount for the first year. The other process on this is that it will escalate more over the time, but this was something that I heard in the board meetings was requested, was keep it low and then set something that's more reasonable as far as an escalation, give us time to get used to it. And so this is one way perhaps to do that, rather than to go in right away with the 161, which is going to fund us more evenly over time and have a much smaller 1% increase in the whole dues. So what are your questions? What are your thoughts? Go ahead, Eric.
So, the second proposal here, or the.
Option two?
Not proposal, but option, yes. The
Yeah.
second option that we're discussing shows that we can achieve the needs that are pointed out by the reserve study with over the years, except for the first 2 years, a 7% increase solid just to meet that. And if I remember right, that was one of the proposals that was brought as a bylaw amendment to the board, I think by Directors Narcico and Holmstrom, that they felt would be prudent for the community. And so this discussion seems to take that into consideration very genuinely.
Of course, it escalates more over time, but it looks like that's what we're going to need in order to catch up. We are so far behind in SURF that the other thing that we don't know, and I think Jennifer mentioned this, but I'm going to just state that every project deferred this year has to be escalated in cost. So in a future year, it's going to cost 3%, 6%, 10% more than it would to do it in the year in which we've planned it. So I worry that that will have an impact as well on how quickly we can get things done and how adequately we will be funded. Our concern, though our concern is for the 10 years, our concern tonight and for our recommendations to the board are for 2019. That's our primary objective, but I think we have, okay, I know I said it wrong, but that, I don't want us to do that blindly without understanding what our future has to be in order to get to a funding. Are we good? Do we have a comment?
One comment. Director Trower, the 7% number does work in this projection, in that option. If you first have a 44% followed by a 13% the next year, and then 7%. And then in the first option, an 87% jump, followed by 4%, then 1% each year. So those, it had to be qualified that way.
We had to get to a starting point that was realistic and was going to allow us to actually meet our fiduciary responsibility regarding the reserves. That was the biggest issue.
But the 7% to start did not
It
get.
wasn't gonna, we weren't gonna get there fast enough, yeah,
So
okay.
when we do the budget next year for 2019, it'll carry over to 2028, correct?
Correct.
So that increase in the dues will be 7%, additional 7% in option 2. Will it be, continue to be 7% every year?
If you
thereafter?
look, let me show you down, if you look down under option 2 at the very bottom, it says percent change. That's the amount of change. So if you look in 2019, it shows 44. So in 2020, it'd be,
That's not the question.
Oh, I guess I
My question is, in
misunderstood.
2028, will there be, continue to be a 7% increase
you know
from
what?
that point on?
I think it's,
Because if that's perpetual,
Mm.
I mean, we're getting way up there in dues, unrealistic amount in dues.
yeah. So the question I guess we have to ask is, what will 10 years from now be? And I think it's hard to imagine. We needed this much to get us through 10 years. Now, at the end of 10 years, we'll have to, we'll know again, we'll have to have a reserve study every year, and by the time we get to that 10th year, we'll know better. You mean, can we reduce the dues? Yeah, if we can, but it depends if we ever get caught up.
I know, but.
I can't say it's
But
7.
all I'm asking is, next year, will 2028 reflect a 7% increase if you use option 2?
Well, 2028?
Yes.
I can't say that. It might be 0. It might be -8.
Right now,
It
we're talking
depends.
about, we're planning for 1 year. And making a projection based on a lot of assumptions that could meet the goal that's at the end of the spreadsheet. However, next year, all of those numbers for the next 10 years are going to be different.
I know.
Okay? And so the next board or the next finance committee, a year from now, is going to be having this same discussion.
But when the membership sees this,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to see a 7% increase year after year in option 2. And there needs to be an explanation if,
I hear what
Okay.
you're saying. Yeah, and we
Because-
don't know what it'll be. It could be 7, it could be 10, it could be 0. We don't know because we don't
But-
have,
okay, what about option 1?
Spreadsheet.
Do we know?
we don't
You don't
know
know that
that
either.
either.
Same thing.
It could be the same thing. And in fact, I can't guarantee that next year, when we look at this, we'll say, let's look at option 1, that 4% is adequate for next year. We
We
don't.
might have an 88% collection rate, we might have a 93% collection
Yeah,
rate.
there's so many things that are factors that we really can't look further than next year. And this was only an attempt to see, are we headed in the right direction however we do this? Have we got enough money coming in that we can be legally meeting our responsibilities?
At this time.
At this point in time, and that's today. That's August 23rd, 2018, period, or 22nd, sorry. I mean, we can't really even say tomorrow, but,
Rick's got a question.
yeah.
Rick.
Rick and then Penny, and then you had one?
Nope,
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
keeping things going.
Sergeant at Arms over there.
He is, and I like him, I like it. Okay, go ahead, Rick.
I got a couple questions.
Okay.
First of all, when I look at option 1, we have a large percentage increase, but when I look at it over 10 years, it's only 1%, but we just talked about 2.5% increase due to inflation and stuff, but I don't see some numbers changing there, so can you talk to that for just a second?
Sure. So in the 10-year plans that are included in this packet in here for both surf and roads, we looked at what was needed to fund 2019, which is a significant amount because you fund all the deficit, what wasn't done in 2018 plus 2019 in both surf and roads. And then the goal there was to keep the dues steady over a 10-year period and be able to fund what was in the reserve study for both surf and roads. And so in in order to do that, to even out the assessments over time, that came to $46.80 a month at 91% collections. And 40 in SURF and $48.05 a month at 91% collections in roads. Now, in your packets, you'll see a slight discrepancy, and that's because these packets are prepared at 93% collections. However, with these significant dues increases, I would recommend going down to 91% collections. We're currently at 97%, so that gives you a 6% drop, which I think is a more conservative proposal with either option that we choose. And so if you put in those dues into these 10-year plans, SURF is starting on page 4. And you can see on page 11. Oh, that's back to roads. They look very similar.
Well, I guess
But it
we don't need to get into that detail.
It funds the plan over the 10-year period. It funds what we have in our reserve study during that time, and that was my goal.
Okay, but that's
But
not
she
my point.
also,
So
she
it-
also did just to follow up on that, in operations, there is an increase
There's a
in operations.
3% increase in operations, except in 2020 where there's a 10% increase because minimum wage goes up $1.50 next year.
Okay, I just want to talk about Surf and Road for just a second. if I
Okay.
can.
So the 2.5% increase is the additional cost of how much it is to maintain items. And so those additional costs are accounted for in option 1 at these rates that are listed here.
Okay, I guess my thought was, so when I look at the projected monthly deficiency or surplus on option 1 versus option 2, we've got a surplus in option 1 and a deficiency in option 2, even in 19. You know, and quite a discrepancy in 20 as well. So my thought was that possibly we would come up with something between the two for option 1, 19, and then just have a 2.5% increase for surf and roads each year as we go on because of inflation.
The direction that I was given for option 1 was to have one solid number across.
10 years?
For 10 years.
Oh,
And so that was what
That doesn't mean we can look at something else. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, there are lots of different ways to do this, but I think we need to first start with where we think we need to be. This is two
Okay.
ends of the spectrum.
I was just trying to understand
Yeah,
the
and
basis,
so,
'cause in my
yeah,
mind.
this isn't like, okay, Rick, you gotta eat one of these or the other.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that is not the case, that's why we're having the discussion, it was primarily to give you a show.
In my mind, with inflation.
Fixing things already. The roads plan, they are inflated, they are based on this year's,
I know, but when we're looking at
Costs, and then we
individual
inflate
years, it's different, but, okay, I'll go to my second
but they're
question.
figured in here per the inflated rate in the year in which they are going to be fixed.
I just think of the normal household that has an income,
Hmm.
and each year they hope to get a raise or have more income next year than they had this year. And so, rather than have a solid number, our property taxes go up, or everything goes up. So I see things going up.
So from your standpoint, it doesn't seem to fit with the standard method of
How people live.
collecting dues and how
Yes.
people live, okay.
Yes,
I
that's all
gotcha,
I'm saying
gotcha.
on
Yeah,
that.
I got it.
My second question is, so on page 3, we have these other things that we know about that aren't included, correct?
Correct.
So we haven't really, I mean, you say, like, some of them have kind of, incremental items have been included, but I guess I'm wondering, should we try to factor those in, or
Not
are
this
we?
year. It's
We
not in
have the
reserve.
reserve study that we have.
Yeah, we have to live with the reserve study we have, and I think that
So
Mitch.
just take the 7 million and hold it out?
Yeah, but that's what Mitch and Jennifer were looking at, is I know this is a ballpark figure, but we know we've got all of these things that will need to be repaired over the next who knows how many years. And so having that additional 7 million may not really be an additional 7 million by the time these get added into the reserve study, because what we don't know right now is where they will be recommended to be put, or where the board might say, oh, we want to, replace the marina parking
Okay
lot
with
next
that. I
year.
just wanted to understand what the ramifications were and how we're gonna look at it as a committee and make a recommendation. That's all I'm asking.
Yep,
So those things are not included at this point.
that's right.
Presumably, we'll look at them over the next year, and it'll be in next year's budget.
And just so you understand, the reserve study is a basis for our, the reserve study we have is the basis for which we have to prepare our budget. It can't be, we can add in the things that aren't going to be there, but we can't manufacture costs and that sort of thing and put them in. We have to give the membership the information about what we do have and what's been already formally prepared. And then next year, we can rethink it, fix it, and represent it. So, we were caught unawares this year. Nobody knew this was coming, so we have to work with what we
do have some adjustments.
have.
For example, last year when we had the reserve study made, we said, take everything out of barn 6 off the
Yeah.
reserve study, because we don't want it.
But now we don't have the demolition of Barn 6 in it, so we don't have that cost.
Right. So we. I
Yeah, so
understand
we're
what you're
working
saying.
on that.
Yeah, I know.
We're working on all those things,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure we're all on the same page when we understand what the numbers are saying and how we're projecting them and what we're doing.
Okay, you think we are now?
Huh?
Do you think we are?
I think so. I'm good with it.
Okay, okay,
Thank
good.
you.
All right, good. Now, Penny,
On option 1 and option 2, there's two different things stated on mailbox. Can you explain that?
Jennifer can.
So the mailbox projection in option 1, that was the only one that I used the fully funded model from the reserve study from, because it was only 90 cents a month, and it seemed like such a small amount. And if you spend 90 cents a month over the next so many years, then in, what year is it? 2040, you can afford to replace all the mailboxes. Whereas in the baseline model, you start off slow and you ramp up to a higher dollar amount, and then in 2040, you can afford the smaller mailboxes. And likewise, with the surf and the roads, to keep the dues the same over all the periods, I chose that 90 cents a month, which is straight from the reserve study. So in option 2, to follow the same thought process with surf and roads is ramping up over a period of 10 years. I went back to baseline and then I ramped it up. So I started at the 67 cents a month and then plus 6% thereafter.
So the percentages, by the way, the percent change at the bottom is the total dues. But within that, each component has different escalation rates depending on what the needs are.
And I wrote those out next to every line so you
Yeah,
can
you
see
can
what
see.
those escalation rates are.
Okay, what other questions? Comments? Thoughts? Eric?
In the baseline funding method, we discussed how we needed to make sure that we were at or above 0 at the end of each year. And in 2019, in option number 2, we're not at 0. Can we make up for that?
So projects will be deferred in 2019.
Okay,
We won't be able to fund everything in the reserve study in option 2 in 2019. It will get deferred until future years, and the finance committee and the
nothing new.
board will need to discuss
Sure.
that.
all right. The second question would be, right now, there's, the board has, or actually the community has agreed on allocation between operations and capital accounts. And does option 2 also assume some reallocation?
So it's just the dollar amounts that are listed there. That would be
Okay.
how it would be allocated every year, just
Okay,
by
so
exactly what
we
Alex
don't need to
listed.
talk about allocation percentages then?
No.
Okay, great.
I don't think so.
Now, let me ask a question. This is just developed lots, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay, so there is going to be a similar schedule for undeveloped, but it's not going to be markedly different.
Correct. For undeveloped lots, I would say the operations would follow the same in 2020 you'd have then 2019, it's gonna be, oh, I don't have that dollar, I
That's
do
okay.
have that dollar amount with
You
me.
do, good for you.
We do. I printed it off. Do I? I apologize, I don't have that with me. I thought I must have left it on the printer. So in 20, it'd be a similar schedule. In 2020, you'd have the 10% increase and 3% thereafter, but the capital dues are the same for developed and undeveloped lots. I got that printer. Where did it? No. I apologize, I don't have that figure with me at the 91% collections without the maintenance
That's
staff
okay.
and the security guard.
Yeah. Capital's going to be the same, so the only.
Capital will
and
be
then
the same.
Do they also pay for mailboxes?
Yep, that's
Okay.
capital.
All right.
Do.
So the only thing that would be different is the ops dues amount, and it's
Correct. Oh, here it
$7 and
is.
something.
So it would be, 44.66 a month in 2019, oh no, excuse me, at 91% collections, it would be 45.64 a month in the undeveloped lots for operations and 758 per month for the operations special assessment. So total operations for the undeveloped lots, would be 53.22. And that's after removing the additional maintenance person and the security swing shift guard. If you have those two people in there, then for both, you refer to page 1, in your packet. And those would be the dues at
That was what
91%.
it was. Okay. So 5322 is for an undeveloped lot ops. right,
Correct,
For 2019.
correct.
Okay. All right.
Were you going to check with our attorney because of the difference between developed and undeveloped, if we could have the difference with the new law?
He's been out of the office, so I've not been able to check with him before today. But yes, that's my plan.
Okay. All right. What are our thoughts? Eric, go ahead.
This might be on a tangent here, but we keep talking about difference in collection rates. And right now, our budget has been set at 93%. We're currently collecting closer to 97%. That's based on the dues that we have right now. And so these thoughts of reducing that collection rate for the purposes of budgeting are, I believe, solely based around on the thought that if you increase dues, the collection rate will decrease. Is that a fair understanding?
I think that's probably the reasoning for going there.
That's my reasoning, that if we increase the dues with either of these options, then that's gonna be a pretty significant increase either way, and that our collections rate will likely drop because of that. On page 2, as we discussed last time, is a history of the actual collections rates. So in 2012, it was at 93.3%. It's about halfway down in yellow, page 2. And in 2013, after the firing of the collection specialist, it was 90%, and then down to 85%. There was no collection specialist in 2013 or 2014. And then in 2015, when we rehired the collection specialist, you can see that dues slowly ramped back up, 91.3, 94.6, and then currently we're at 96.6%. So, I mean, it is just a shot in the dark to say what are dues gonna do next year, but I think that conservatively, and to ensure that, that we don't project more money than we think we're gonna get, that if we go down to 91%, this seems like a fairly reasonable estimate, given that when there was no collection specialist, it was 90 and 85%, and we're gonna continue to have a collection specialist. So even with this large increase, I think that we could maintain 91% collections. And that's just my opinion. I would like your input and advice as to what the finance committee would recommend as the collections rate for next year in our budgets.
So I think that really clarifies what I was thinking. So what our job is going to be to recommend to the board a couple of things. And they're both codependent. One of them is the amount of dues increased and the collection rate that we would assume in the budget. And both of those are moving targets right now.
Well, one of the things I'm noticing on page 2 of 46, if you look at the dues, the annual dues, I'm trying to understand where there might have been increases. And if you see like in 20,
Nowhere.
let's see, special assessment, I'm trying to see what if you look at the ops dues of the total amount, they all seem to be pretty close to the same, but I don't know that increases in dues necessarily follow that you're going to have a drop in collection rate.
Well, they had a drop in collections because they didn't have a collection person
That was
there.
my point. If we have a collections person, they usually can work with people and develop a plan, a payment plan, so I appreciate the conservative nature, but I'm not sure if 6% maybe is,
Well, there's not a time when we have a 44%, minimum 44% increase. I think 91% is, I mean,
You think
it's just a
that's-
guessing game, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
go any higher than that.
okay.
But I mean, what do I know?
That was my question is, are you comfortable with that? Okay.
So maybe that's the first thing that we should resolve here is to settle on what we, get out the Ouija board and figure out what percentage of collections we would like to assume in our budget assumptions.
We've talked about this before. I mean,
Right.
I rely on her experience and expertise, and it seems like a reasonable assumption, so I would stick with the 91%.
Okay.
And I know that we don't have anything in the agenda to vote on a
Well, I think we can
percentage,
vote on
but we
each
can-
piece of this as to what we're going to recommend to the board. I think we can. So if there's a motion for us to recommend, go
I
ahead,
make
Rick.
a motion that we accept 91% as the assumption for the collection rate
Okay,
for 2019.
okay. Is there a second? Okay, Paula seconded. Okay. All right, any discussions?
Yeah,
or
the
if
only
we
thing I
have-
would say, it's tough to nail down a collection percentage when we haven't decided if we're gonna take the dues to 160 or 125,
This is true.
so.
So do we need to postpone that decision? I'll take a recommendation to do so if you wish.
What impact
What did-
would the collection rate have on what option we are?
How do we
doing?
know?
I don't think we could make a guess on that.
Yeah.
And we have to have some baseline to start talking about numbers.
Well, we also know that if we are going to assume a lower percentage rate, then that means the necessary dues increase has to be higher in order to meet the needs.
This is based on a 91%.
That's correct.
All the numbers are already based on
It's already
91.
based on
That's right.
91. So if we approve 91, then we can work off
We
of
can
the
work
sheet.
with this sheet, yes.
So I think that we have the recommendation from staff to go to 91% moving forward in these discussions.
I think either one of these is going to be a significant impact on the property owners in our community. And, I think a large part of them are going to try to get behind it and support it and make whatever means to try to pay their dues. And with the processes and the procedures that we've implemented over the last 3 years, we've done a great job of improving that situation. But obviously, it's going to have an impact on many people in our community. So certainly something less than what we're actually achieving at this point in time is, I think, a reasonable assumption.
I think Colin has a point. If we're at 105, could
Even worse.
even worse. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Jennifer? You recommended 4 different options the last time, 90, 91, 92, and 93. And you went with 91 because of the higher number, would you say?
I was just looking back over the dues history and where we were at when we had a collection specialist. And in 2015, we had a lot of past due accounts, a lot of people not paying their dues at our current rates in 2015. And we were able to talk to those people, start sending out letters and get them to start paying their dues again. So, and then in 2012, it was at 93%. I wasn't here then. And we've been able to bring it up after that, but given that there were so many people past due in 2015, for example, we were filing over 90 small case claims cases a month for 9 months. They gave us our own day in court because so many people were past due and not coming in to pay their dues, and so it got to the point of filing in small claims. It just depends on what everyone's threshold is before they decide to come talk to us. And so it's a shot in the dark.
And my point, I'm concerned that we went through a very difficult time in 2007, 2008, where the economy just crashed. And I don't know what would happen over the next 10 years. We could have some kind of impact on that.
Absolutely.
So I'm comfortable with 91. I would have a hard time going up over 91.
Okay, this is, remember, for 2019.
I know.
So if we can look at it that way,
I'm looking at it that way, but
Yeah.
I'm also looking at the future.
absolutely, I think we do.
Okay, are we gonna go through the budget line item by line item? We should do that. Remember we
Wanna
do that tonight?
First, yes.
Or is that not something
Well-
we're doing tonight?
We went through.
We
went through it
did
last
last.
We went, oh, yeah, we did go through it, but I mean,
Last
we
week.
can go through whatever
No, I don't
questions you
know.
have.
Any questions,
Any-
if you have?
Did you go through it?
No.
Okay.
I don't know that we went through it very
We went through it.
thoroughly because it was presented last week.
Just as a rough.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that we went line item by line item in any sort of depth or discussion.
Well, I've spent
at
hours
all.
with it, so.
No, I mean,
But that's
I
good,
spent time
and I'm,
personally, but not
I
as a
think
group.
we should
Yeah,
talk about them and the ones
That's what we
that
were
are the
supposed to do for
concern.
this week,
was
is
the
to come
plan.
back with all of those,
All
the
those
questions
concerns.
and concerns about those line items, so.
Well, I want to get back to, we have a motion on the floor.
We do, and I just
true.
want to know whether you want to continue with the motion or,
Table it
okay.
Until-
Until,
until we finish the rest of the discussion.
okay.
Well, if we're gonna focus on this, I really appreciate you coming up with a second option. I really like option 2, and, I mean, we've been through the reserve study, we've seen all the individual items, we all know that the things that are on there need to be done at some point. We know the numbers, I see the increase in ops, and it seems reasonable. So I guess, do we need to recommend one of these two options to the board tonight? No?
Well, I think we can. I think
We
we can.
can.
Yes, we can.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this, we've been getting an
Yes, we
idea
have.
of what these, I mean, I would, I would make a motion to approve option 2 and recommend it to the board as, the due structure for 2019.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's a move and second. Comments, questions, you wanted,
I still have a question about the 91%, because that's what we're basing this on, it's 91%.
Well, so
assume.
it would include,
It
it's
includes,
based on the
this
assumption
is
of a
based,
91%
this is
collection
based on
rate.
91%.
So we're going to get rid of the first motion?
It's
Well,
already
the
been
first
tabled.
motion has been tabled. It's tabled. It's until we get a chance to talk about the ops budget. Now, here's the thing, as we go through the ops budget, we've already been through roads, we've already been through surf. Do you need to go through those again?
No,
Anybody
we've
need to
been through
do?
them plenty.
Yeah, I think we've been through it. So only one we're gonna go through is the ops budget tonight. The only thing that I would say is, any changes that you might negotiate, let's say, and that's gonna be with Jennifer and Mitch, to the ops budget, is probably gonna have a minimal impact on whether or not you're gonna go with which of these. So I think you can choose which structure you'll wanna follow. That would be just my guess.
I'd like to just talk about the options, the two options. These are interesting options, and I appreciate the way that we've done this, and I wondered if there's any other options that we might talk about. I know there's not one presented to us, but you know, is there another combination here where the dues goes up a certain amount and we do a special assessment for a period of time?
Well, this only talks about the monies collected. We can set we can set this as a special assessment if we wish.
That's not
So,
my question.
okay,
I'm talking about a different plan that would be an ops budget, or it would be a budget for the dues that, but then we would have a special assessment for just a specific period of time, which would not necessarily follow this. That would be somewhere, that would be a way to fund option one, for instance, so that we don't have a $225 dues on our horizon in 10 years. So, it's pay me now or pay me later in this, and so the question is whether or not there is a third option here that is looking somewhere, maybe it's in between these, I don't know. But the idea of a special assessment seems to make a lot of sense to me, and a 5-year special assessment, I'm pulling that out of the air, but a 5-year special assessment that we know is gonna go away, and keep the dues at a lower level. So I'd like to see that somehow, and if I'm the only one, then fine, but I just don't, I'm concerned that we're looking at this totally from one perspective, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, there's two perspectives.
It's all dues.
Oh, as far as a payment amount, I guess there's a different perspective.
yeah.
Right, but not as far as,
Well, whether you call it dues or a special assessment, you're still paying a certain amount per month. But for you, it's different if part of it's a special assessment?
I think I understand where she's at. So dues are assessments. Okay,
Right.
they're synonymous. And so if we're talking about assessments, there's a difference between a 1 year where we're deciding what next year's assessment level is going to be. And what you're asking, I think, is can there be an assessment that we decide on or recommend that would be for multiple years for roads or multiple years for surf?
right,
Okay.
Right.
I understand.
yeah, like we
Yeah,
did
I
for
got that.
mailboxes, we did a special assessment for mailboxes for 3 years or whatever it was back in early 2000s to pay for the installation of the mailboxes.
So
So,
let's,
I mean, is there some categories in here that we should consider funding by a special assessment that would be just dedicated towards that, as opposed to just doing the broad surf roads and,
so are you thinking, let me just clarify to make sure I understand. So dues would be just the ops piece of it. And then for capital, you're suggesting perhaps, just for the sake of saying, 5-year assessment that covers certain pieces in the surf plan? Is that what you're thinking?
surfer roads, yeah.
Surfer roads?
Yeah.
So we have
Like-
10-year plans for both.
Like $50, I'm gonna make this up, $25 a month for bridges in the road plan, or culvert work in the road plan, or paving, because we're behind on paving. Something that's going to be there to catch us up in a certain way for a finite period of time, and then we see that, like this is done here, I mean, Eric made a great point around, hey, this looks like this option falls in line with what some of the request was from the community to keep it at a reasonable increment every year. Well, is there another way to do that? And I don't see that here, and I thought that's what we asked for back in May when we originally started our conversation,
Well,
so.
I hear what you're saying. The challenge is that the requirements for the reserve study are such that this is the money we have to come up with, and we're trying to figure out the easiest way to do it. We can split it up into special assessments, we can do it as dues, but in the end, the same amount of money has to be done. Or we're going to have to continue to defer as we have for years, and then we're out of compliance with our reserve study.
What if We could start the conversation with something simple like mailboxes.
Okay.
We have experience with mailboxes and special assessments that last for a period of time. And both of these options are looking at mailboxes at 90 cents per month. Or the second one, they both average 90 cents a month. And so if we just removed mailboxes from this entire thing and said we could recommend a special assessment of 90 cents per month for mailboxes and put that in the budget, I think we could probably get that to fly, both, in our committee and at the board. And it would remove it from that conversation. And if we chipped away at different parts of it in that same way, chipped away at roads in that same way, chipped away at surf in that same way, is that more along the lines of what you were considering as?
Yeah. I mean, because then it's like, right or wrong, it feels like there's this big nebulous pot, and it's like 10 pages long, or whatever it is, the reserve study of all the items, line item by line item by line item. And I think that's just the surf. It gets 10 pages. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's a lot of pages. And then we have 2 or 3 pages of the roads. And I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I mean, I understand what we have to do and what the challenge is there. But it kind of gets mushed around. And it's kind of, I think, hard to follow for individuals to understand, well, how come such and such costs this much, and so I don't know, is there a special assessment that we should have for some component of roads, for instance?
But how does that pay for what we need to get done with the roads any better than how it's paid, how it's done under this structure? How is that?
Because there's a possibility that we could, that it would be something in between this. It may not help, but I'm looking at a substantial monthly projection for dues out at 2027. And we're talking about, in this case, we're talking about $37 a month. Is that right? No, it's more than that. It's 17, and that's $42 a month difference back out in 2027 of a higher rate for dues.
It's $15, right?
$25, $225 versus $183.
210. Are you talking about from 2024 to 2027?
I'm looking at 2027. I'm looking at the 10-year. We're looking at 10 years out to see where we are. I mean, we're looking at what the projection is, and this is what's projected out. Wow, that's a pretty big, substantial difference.
Well, if you add them up, all of, it's the same amount of money. It just depends on where it's coming, whether it's coming earlier or later. Right?
I get it.
Yeah. So, it's, we could argue about what's a better way to do it, and we could have a difference of opinion. It's not one of these things that's.
Well, the other
So
thing.
so you think it's gonna hit too hard, the increases later on are too big, or within a certain period of time. My perspective is having it spread out the way it is would be easier for most people to absorb than having an 87% increase in the first year.
I understand,
So we
and
just
I'm also
disagree. That's
concerned-
okay.
Yeah, and I'm also concerned about the cost of things the longer that we put it off. That these numbers have the 2.5% in there, but that's assuming that we do everything when we say we're gonna do everything, it's at 2.5%. If we keep deferring it, it's not 2.5% because it's greater than that. So that's I'm thinking this short-term and long-term and trying to figure out, is there another way to look at this?
There is, and let me just, this is one thing that I thought about, and that was that if we start low like this and we determine that there's something, and I think I started to say this earlier, but let's just say there's something we decide that we want to get done faster than our roads plan or our surf plan dictates, or our reserve study dictates. And then we have been able to put it in, I mean, obviously, we're already adjusting our studies, both of them, in order to be able to accommodate this lower dues at the start. And we're gonna have to ramp up to pay them later. But let's say, next year, in 2019, the Finance Committee comes together and says, something's gotta be done about the marina parking lot. And we don't have the money in here yet to do it. They could then say, we're gonna assess a special assessment, we're gonna get that thing done. It's gonna be over, it's like $2.5 million as we look at it today. Could be more by the time we actually get to it. So at that point, you could then escalate within this, I mean, you could continue with the dues as you're going and then put a special assessment out for that special project. Or, as you said, bridges or something of that nature. I don't know that we have the time to come up with that sort of thing now, but we can do that in the future. Just making sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
It is-
Paula and then Tony.
one way of doing it.
Yeah,
So to bring up a completely other way to look at it, with all respect, when I looked at this, and I poured over the surf numbers, and I poured over the roads numbers, and I poured over the ops numbers over the last week. And frankly, I'm really glad to see this option too, because regardless of, to me, and as a finance committee member and as a community member that really wants to see everything happen, of course, all the numbers I care about. But for the purpose of right now, for the next year, I'm not even looking, I mean, I am, but I'm not looking at the rest. I'm honestly not, because we're looking at even at option 2, a 44% increase for our people. I personally couldn't feel good recommending much more than $120 to $125 to begin with to increase our dues to next year in a 1-year jump for our community. That's understanding it. I care about what everything else on there looks like, and I want to get to this, and I understand that by deferring it, we are going to have a huge problem. But to me, we're talking about a whole lot of things that we are not even prepared to get to until we get past this next year.
yeah. There's a lot of planning that needs to go into escalating things faster. The other thing is that we really can't predict what it will be like next year. And so I think all we're trying to do is give information. The next year is the one that we're mostly concerned about, and we're trying to provide people with information about how serious our situation is and has been. And that's primarily what I see this spreadsheet as. Yes, it could go that high, it could go higher, it may not go that high. We can't predict it, but this is our best guess based on what we know today from our reserve study.
And I understand we may get there. I mean, we may end up at those numbers in 10 years. But I don't think that we can really look past, for what I feel comfortable moving forward and right now is, I don't know that we can look at much more than a 44% jump, which is what our option 2 looks like. That's about as big as far as I can really see forward right now.
Okay, good.
I raised that same question earlier, and you said, don't look ahead. Because I was concerned with that money. So I have to focus on what next year's going to be, then we can decide next year what we're going to be, what's going to happen. And I agree that I would rather have a lower dues, $124, than the higher amount.
So we have a motion on the floor
Yeah.
about adopting option number 2
Yeah,
as
so-
the recommendation to the board. That's been seconded. Call the question.
Okay, question's been called unless there's an objection. Yes,
Can I
please.
discuss it?
Yes, you can discuss it,
So
yes.
if I'm looking at this, I mean, I'm good with roads and surf, and mailbox. I don't know that we've really fully discussed the operations.
We're going
and
to.
that- Okay,
So
so are we prepared to say, to
So,
recommend the 124
my
then, given that
right,
that's
no, my
significant?
recommendation is, I think the recommendation was this structure, option 2 structure. And so if there is an adjustment to it from any discussions we have in operations,
So the
is that
structure of
acceptable?
the
Does
lower
everybody
amount.
agree with that?
Not the amount. Okay.
So I think I see where Paul is at, and it does make sense to agree on the components before the overall proposal. Is there anything specific in that operations thing that you wanted to look into?
I mean,
We're gonna discuss, I want to discuss
So
it
maybe,
separately.
maybe we should hold off on this vote
Okay, do
until
you
after
wanna-
that.
Okay,
But
This is the backwards meeting.
yeah,
It's actually great for me to know what structure you want to go with, because as we're going to discuss the operations budget, I'm sure that there'll be some adjustments to that. So when we meet again, I can just bring you the updated operations numbers at the one, with the one structure, instead of preparing two different
Okay.
analyses.
that's, okay, that's fair enough.
yeah, and
then-
that's why I'd like to just at least go forward and come up with the agreement that we're gonna go with the option 2 structure.
Into structure, not necessarily the
The
exact
specific numbers may change slightly, but probably not
the
significantly.
option
something
two,
more.
assuming that we're not fully funding operations, or that we're not fully funding the reserves right now.
Correct,
Exactly, okay.
that over a 10-year period,
Okay.
you would come to the same place.
This is baseline funding,
Okay.
yeah.
I think, we've got a consensus, what I'm hearing in the background here is that everybody has a real hard pill to swallow with taking option 1. And everybody doesn't like option 2, but we can't, in our own minds, recommend a higher increase than what option 2 is presenting, just as Paula said. And the other piece that we talked about before we got into this lengthy discussion is that there's a whole lot of other things about SURF that need to be thought out in a different manner than are detailed at this point. And that's not gonna happen until we get to the next budget cycle in next year.
We've got a lot of work to do before that.
It's not possible to get
Yeah.
all of this stuff in line with the law and then take in all the different scenarios and analysis based on what the law's impact has been and a philosophy and strategy going forward as to what's the best way to financially maintain the assets of our community.
Right.
So, I think we've talked all around this.
So are you speaking in favor of the option 2?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm
If I
just
wasn't
double
clear.
checking. No, I'm just double checking. I'm concerned now that, Penny, are you still having concerns about this?
Need to call the question.
Well, I
Well,
think that I
it
would.
has been called. I wanna
did
make
call-
sure you're doing it
I did
before.
call the question, but do you have the actual motion, Ashley?
Colin Morrow moved to approve option 2 structure as the 2019 budget recommendation to the Board of Directors.
That sounds exactly like what we were
And I think that's what I
speaking
was
about, and
And
expecting.
if
we
between
were
now
gonna-
and the final budget, we change the ops budget
Right.
a little bit here or there, then it'll be reflected, but it still will be
Right,
consistent.
same
with the-
structure.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah,
those-
the
those-
question has been called.
Those of you who are in favor of recommending the option 2 structure as our go-forward for the budget to the board, please signify. Okay, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Very good. All right, moving forward. You want to go to, let's go through the ops budget now. And please bring to me, now, we've already talked to, Mitch has already commented that he is recommending, or Jennifer and Mitch have recommended to take the security person off. That is on, if you look at the salary summary, there was.
Security person is not included in the salary.
Oh, that's right, they're a professional, got it. But the under maintenance, you had 1.8 people, it's now 0.8, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
In this,
in that spreadsheet, okay, so
it would be 0.8 people, and I can give you the data totals.
would that be a full-time person, so is it now 2.9 for full-time?
She's recommending 0.8.
2.8.
What's 2.8?
Page are you on?
14.
Under maintenance?
No, the difference now is 2.8.
At the bottom.
No worries.
Okay, oh, got it,
So,
okay, the difference is
Subtotal
2.8.
ops,
So
2.8?
No, that doesn't make sense.
Well, it was 3.8, now we're down to 2.8.
Oh, this is 2.8, okay, got it.
this is 0.8, this is 2.8.
So
Okay.
that reflects what we were just agreeing to.
And then the salary total in operations, for maintenance in 2019 would be 204,159.99, which is
Where is this? Tell me where you are.
What's this?
under salaries for maintenance.
Yep.
On your sheet, it says 244,199.
Yep.
It would be 204,159. And then the difference is 46,133. It also changes taxes and maintenance, brings taxes and maintenance in 2019 to 25,374. Should have just printed this. And that's a $5,358 difference. And under health insurance, changes
You're
it.
moving much quicker than everyone else.
Yeah, I can't.
You know where these
I'm trying
spots
to
are.
change the penny.
Under
First
maintenance,
number, that was it.
29, what was the, under 2019 for maintenance taxes? What is that number?
Maintenance taxes will be 25,374,
So the difference is,
5,358.
Okay,
I got that far.
okay,
Great.
all right, very good.
5,000.
358.
Health
And then
insurance will
health
also
insurance.
be adjusted,
Okay,
This is health insurance.
so that,
Salary taxes.
And this will be 25.
and I'd be happy to email out a updated copy.
What was that? I missed the last piece.
Be
all
happy
right,
to
so
email
here's
out an
another.
updated
Do you
copy.
want the data? She's gonna email a copy, but let's,
Health insurance will be 26,165 in maintenance. And the difference is 4,840.
okay.
Gotcha.
What's the
All right.
grand total difference?
The grand total difference is 233,912. And the grand total is 1,824,695.
I lost that.
1,824,695.
Got it, okay.
So I mean, the only thing I'm looking at is it looks like so that difference is a 15%, just under a 15% increase over last year. You look at them individually, it doesn't seem like much, but
And a $50,000 savings from what was originally in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you want to talk about this one?
well, no, I mean, I guess overall, I mean, yeah, so it's a 15% increase to salaries and benefits overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Health insurance is projected at a 15% increase for next year, according to, after speaking with our provider.
Got it. So,
On
how big of an increase?
15%. On page 12,
That sounds low to me, but.
So can I ask a quick question on that? Have you, how long have you been with that provider? And have you looked at other providers on where those benefit packages may differ in different providers?
so we're with Hub, so Hub puts together a package, and this is what they'll shop it.
No, I'm familiar with them. Okay.
on page 12, you'll see a summary of the changes to 2019 salaries, taxes, and benefits. Of course, with the updated numbers I gave you, the one new maintenance staff member would not be included in that.
Now, the admin staff, we lost half of a staff.
You lost
Kinda.
the whole staff.
Was that really her, she was the whole?
She's 100% now ACC and
Okay.
security.
So Jessica, who is our ACC coordinator,
That's
what is that,
correct.
was that what we call her now? She's been swamped. We have 30 new starts.
35,
Oh, geez,
that's how fast that changed.
that's
That's
amazing.
fantastic.
That's
From last week?
incredible. That's
It was in our,
great.
it went up 4 last week, and then Ashley is now supporting the GM. So, I mean, we're moving that around. So we are losing staff fast.
Okay, well, losing them, but
Well, actually, we're not losing them.
you're repurposing them, and they're,
You know, when I did the monthly report, which goes through the board tomorrow, I was stunned at how much work is going through the ACC coordinator's job. I think the most important thing in the salary change is the Firewise for 1 month, the entire maintenance and the maintenance seasonal crew onto operations. And that is an excessive amount of operational funds that we have now put back in here that were not in here before. It takes an entire month to take that whole team and pick up everything that everyone is trimming and clearing and setting off to the side of the road and collecting it and taking it away.
okay. Well,
We
but
have
it's
not
important.
designated that and set it off to the side.
It's a good investment in the community.
So we've put it up and saying, look, let's just call it what it is. This is, we've been doing this now, and it has to be operations, it can't be capital. And so we've been stealing the money, saying, okay, we're gonna come pick it up. But it turned out to be an entire month's activity this year.
Well, and I think it's been a long time since we've been able to actually do this job effectively, and I think it's great that we have a handle on it, and that it's being done by staff so that it's consistent in every neighborhood. So,
And that was the same thing with the summer events, was
That's
just
correct.
properly allocating that money to where it's happening.
It takes a lot of effort to set up that 4th of July, clean up the 4th of July, set up Bite, take down Bite. And we're going for larger and larger events, but then we are getting a lot of members in those events now. You know, 700 at 4th of July and possibly 600. Do we need to take a minute, Madam Treasurer?
I'm going to close the doors.
Oh, possibly 600 at Bite.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's the first I've
the
heard.
number is just going up higher and higher. That's, you know, we looked at our money that we set aside for events, and we said, okay, all right, you can do an event. Fishing Derby's been a big event here for a long time. How much money did we spend? How many people would come to it? This is how many bucks per person, per member at an event. And then you look at that and say, okay, well, I mean, it's a nice thing, but you want to get the most amount of members per buck that you spend for them to come. And so we've changed up our events now, and we're going to much more organized, much wider and broader type activities to bring in the community. And we're getting a better turnout per member per buck.
I think that's great. And I think it's supported by the community, so that's, makes it nice.
We'll find out, won't we?
Okay, any other questions about any of these items?
Colin, are you clear on all of that?
On the salaries?
Yeah, and the assumptions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There's specific questions that you guys wanted to go through on the ops budget?
One thing I had on the facilities department, I did have a question. I think you touched on this last week, I'm not positive, that we don't
Okay, what
currently have
page?
any.
What page are you
I'm
on?
still on 12, just on the assumptions.
Okay.
On the recycling services, so we currently have 0 recycling services in
Zero.
Sun Valley?
We received $1,500 in the special assessment to start recycling in this building, but we don't recycle throughout the rest of the association. Can you imagine what it's gonna be like to put recycling containers over by the mailboxes?
You don't have to sell me on it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of paper. But plastic, cans, paper, we don't recycle, we haven't. And I think we need to do that.
Recycle by the mailboxes?
We're thinking of putting paper recycling containers at the mailboxes and then move our signs from the gates to the mailboxes with a solar light, which is what we put the solar light tryout at Gate 1, and the solar light has been working. So it holds over the winter now, and it charges. So thinking, okay, Should we go ahead and start putting paper recycling there and let people shed all the garbage they don't want while they're looking at what's going on at the news, what's going on in the association at a board? Because we also spend a lot of time updating those street signs, and people complain they can't read them. They're driving by. So we're thinking of that. But otherwise, at our buildings, recycle containers, recycle waste receptacles. We'd have to put them in our facilities, plastic cans.
What was the driving by thing? I don't get it.
Well, when you see the signs at the gates,
Is there sandwich boards for announcing meetings
Board
and
meetings.
such?
Okay.
all right, you can put 2 messages there. Well, we have a lot of meetings going on. We have a lot of activities going on in the association, and we're not getting the message out. But everyone goes to their mailbox. So what if we were to put up a sign, weekly sign at the mailboxes inside a box, where you could look at, this is what's going on this week in Sudden Valley,
Okay.
and there's a recycle container right there, so get your mail. Don't want that one, don't want that one, don't
Okay.
want that one. What's happening here at the association? Don't want that one, don't want that one. I don't want this bill. Oh, here's my dues. I don't want that one. You know,
Got it.
How many clusters do we have to?
9,
As opposed to 5 gates?
that's correct.
Well, so, yeah, what's gonna be the ongoing annual cost of
So the
maintaining it?
cost projected for this year is 79,1921. Our budget was 81. So if you look on page 20, look at facilities. So, our budget for this year is 81,65, and the budget would go to 15,171. That's page 20.
You're on page 6?
Page 20. Yeah, you gotta look at 20 of 46. There you go.
Would,
Where are you looking, trash and recycling?
That's correct, 6035 GL number. So that's about $7,000 increase.
So, trying to increase the communication for the association and how we can reach the members and communicate with them.
Yep.
Well, they all go to their mailboxes. That's one thing we do know, and we can, so think about it as a sheet of paper instead of these huge sheets that we print out for 2 messages at 5 mailboxes. There's 6 gates, but we don't have,
They go to 6 gates.
oh,
They go to 6 gates. There make 6 gate signs.
So now someone's gotta drive around all the mailbox clusters and update them and,
well, security does that in Owl Shift. This is what they're supposed to do anyway. They drive through, so they would pull them out, put them in once a week. And this is the message of the week. Just like, think about it as a cruise ship. Here's the event of the week.
yeah, I think I understand. It's an extra $7,000. Who knows if it's worth it or not, right? You guys obviously think it is.
Well, you can tell us if you think it's a good idea to do it.
Based on what you're saying, I don't think it is.
But that's
It's-
including the recycling.
That's
The
included.
that number.
$7,000 is a 3% increase expected in trash plus anticipated cost for recycling service for all the buildings in the association. So this building, admin, maintenance, turf, we currently do not recycle. There could be a blue can under your desk. Doesn't mean anything.
So what's the breakout between this, so you're putting the signage in with your recycling services? Is that what you're saying?
We're saying that we would like to put signage.
But that's
We
not
would
what
do
we're
that as-
talking about in the budget.
No, we're
The-
talking-
The $7,000 is the
That's-
recycling services within
recycling
Sutton Valley.
services.
Correct.
Is that?
And then the signage cost is,
That's out of facilities.
The signage cost would come out of the
and that would be a
Like-
one-time cost of the,
right,
6050 maybe?
6515 probably.
building or?
Billing R&M,
Could be building R, or it could be other R and M, but there's money budgeted in building R and M, so it would come out of that budget, even if it gets properly.
It's
billed.
not $7,000 for 9 signs,
No.
No,
because I would agree with you on that, that would be excessive.
Yeah.
Signs
It's really $7,000 to add recycling in places where we feel like we should have it.
Right.
And to
Correct.
piggyback on that, we're gonna communicate better at a
Sign-
minimal cost.
The signboards, I
Yes.
think, are 150.
Unless they're electronic.
No, we're not doing electronic, no,
Eric, we don't have time for jokes.
It's already 8:10.
yes.
Move on.
No, they're not electronic.
Don't bring up no.
What about the
new
solar
business.
lights?
They're minimal in cost as well. I was really surprised.
All right, so are we okay with, you're not happy with the 7?
Well, I
For
mean,
recycling?
you know, I think we should recycle. I mean, I'm from here. I don't want my credentials taken away. I mean, yeah,
It's, hey, it's an additional amount. Listen, these are all things that are things that have been discussed, and we can recommend or not recommend, so,
well, yeah.
keep it in your bonnet and move on. Anything else? What else is of interest to you? The ones that I was most concerned about, I mentioned already to Mitch, and he's taking those out.
We're shopping the audit next year.
Yeah, we
Is that
have
right?
to, this
Right.
year.
Yeah.
This year for
Oh.
next year.
Yeah, we send out the RF request for bid this year and come back next year.
That's actually for this year's audit, right?
Do we think,
2018's audit?
For 2018's audit, yeah.
so Mitch is retiring again? Is that what I hear?
Yes,
Effective,
December 31st, my last day.
okay? And we're just assuming that we're gonna pay the same GM, or are we assuming we're paying the new GM the same that we're paying you, or
I don't think you should assume that.
what's in the assumptions?
I prepared this before that announcement, but the GM salary was not changed in this projection.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, should we,
I don't know
Should
what he
we-
makes, I don't know anything about what GM should make, I don't have any, I'm just curious if that was already factored into this, and, or whether or not it even should be, I mean, I don't know, maybe we can't find somebody for the same, I have no idea, so. I see, you know, salaries are up 14.5% overall, that's something that people are gonna,
last,
Ask about.
2 years ago, there was a search for a new GM, and I think that the range for salary for a new GM was,
150,000.
yeah, that was,
Plus benefits.
yeah, and that was 2 years ago, what they were
Good job
finding.
with you, David.
Yeah. And so I would imagine 2 years later, it probably didn't go down.
yeah.
So,
So much for cut rate discounts.
and
Mitch
so-
makes 250,
Mitch-
right?
So right
Careful,
now,
he may be coming to you with a bill.
right now, if I remember right, we're what, around 110 or something, 115?
114.
114. And so 150 was a couple of years ago, the ballpark
Yeah.
that they were coming in at.
Okay,
And so I would imagine that we would need to plug something in.
sounds like we might be light.
Yeah. At least, I mean, we're making a lot of assumptions here, but that's what this whole budget.
That's what budgeting
That's
is.
what budgeting is all about.
That's, so
And at
maybe,
this
The
point,
answer is
we
you wouldn't have
know
to
that
budget, you would just,
Great question.
we have to
That's a
find
good
somebody
assumption.
new.
I mean, you did a qualified search, and
Right.
We
that's
did.
what it was, and the job market is
tighter now.
vastly different than it was even 6
And-
months ago.
And so it might be a really good idea for us to assume an extra 50,000 just for that.
Plus, there was, if I heard right, there's gonna be a fee. If you're gonna go to a headhunting agency, there's going to be a.
Well, it's a one-time, yeah,
That's a one-time fee, but that fee is not accounted for.
yes, right.
Well, theoretically, that fee should go into this year.
We know when that search is going to
It
begin.
depends on when we
Well,
find the
The
GM.
search has to happen,
December 31st.
The
search has to
fee
happen
will
ASAP, yeah.
be, the fee will be based on the, most likely, some work on a fee basis in which you pay them for the time to do it, or an amount to do it. Others charge you on a basis of the person who gets hired.
We're making,
way.
we're making some assumptions here too,
We
because
make
we haven't even
assumptions.
talked about this at the board yet.
Yeah,
And
we
the
have.
board gets to,
Yeah,
Either way, it's 2018.
The fee,
the fee will be in, all of it will be in 2018.
because that's when the work will have been done.
But when you go to look at the assumption, I think that, I mean, should we be putting in a higher assumption when we look, before we look at this again next?
I think that adding
Next time.
50K into administrative salaries is a wise move for 2019.
right, but we can't, and when we're dealing with this 2019 budget, the headhunter fee doesn't,
No,
that's this year.
no, but if we knew
That's
3 years
different.
ago that an average salary was 150 and we're paying 115, and 115's in the budget, then we should increase the amount.
Should increase.
Yeah.
Probably $30,000.
At least
In the next
30.
version we look at, we should probably consider that. Yeah.
You want to add 30?
So I think, no, we should add 50, actually.
That's what I think.
Add
I think
50?
more like, well, because, think about it, if it was 150 several years ago, I don't want to say that it's going to cost us 165,000, but it could.
Then you have benefits and taxes.
By the time you add, so even if you pay 150,
Benefits and
it's going
taxes
to
are already
be
in the budget.
At one.
At 114.
at 114, but,
Taxes aren't gonna be that much different. Benefits.
no,
health
that's the
insurance.
base salary.
Benefits
That's
is
base
about
salary.
30 to 35% for benefits.
So the benefits are already in the budget.
Right, that's what, yeah, you should
They don't
probably
go up
change
with
that.
They're not
salary.
commensurate to.
Some of
Health
the
insurance
taxes
is
will be.
whether you're paying, you know,
Yeah.
150.
That's a one-to-one, we lose one, we gain
Got it.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Got it.
a wash.
Assuming he.
What would you like us to put in?
I would add 50.
I
50?
figured that 50, and if we can save money, great.
Right.
Well, you've just told society what the range is.
Well,
Well, that's yeah.
Okay.
that's the nature of open meetings.
That is but I think that you would be wise to go in conservative on a higher number and work down. Than steal money from salaries and try to work on it.
Correct.
And should probably make it very clear that for anybody watching this meeting, that does not mean that that is the range. That's not the range that is being suggested. That is not the range that is being recommended. That is not.
It's not who we go to
That
the
is not the
headhunter and
blah,
say,
blah,
we want
blah."
somebody for that amount of money. No.
That is looking at what we,
What we
the
think.
brutal truth of what we may be looking at.
Okay, I'm just making some notes here. All right. That's salaries. What else?
I was looking at the pool, health club and parks, that goes up quite a bit. Now, obviously, we weren't open and doing all that full time,
Right, now,
but speak to that a little.
Jennifer spoke to this last time, and if you'll recall, remember, this is a special assessment.
Right,
And so if you look at the pages.
so that's fully funded at this,
If you look at the pages, starting on page number 25 through 26, and then 27, you'll see that at the 2019 budget, income minus expenses is 0, because
But this is
of the
assuming a 93% collection rate on this one, correct? Is that what you said last week?
yeah,
Right, so the
good point.
it does assume a 93% collections rate. So the finance committee would need to advise whether those expenses should be reduced as well. Now, the special assessment that was put through assumes a 93% collections rate. It has a set amount of dues that are gonna come through on it. You know, would you continue to make the pool and health club budget a net zero budget? So you take away 2% of expenses? Or would you keep those 2% of expenses there? Does that make sense?
you mean to have it,
Understand.
So would you have a loss?
No, you cut the,
You cut the expenses.
expenses?
so it doesn't,
So then it will,
Balances.
so
you
then,
can see what collections are and
Yeah.
adjust accordingly.
okay, so I'll make that adjustment as well.
Okay. pool.
I've got a $9,000 increase in marina and dry slip income.
So if you look at the Marina Department, page 30 of 46,
It's actually more consistent with where they've been.
right,
Yeah, okay, got it.
but there's no change in the Marina rates.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
It is budgeted low for 2018.
Correct.
Oh, I'm wondering why all my notes are not on here, and it's because this is,
That's why I'm comparing
I
the
keep
two
going
of them.
between the two.
I've got mine somewhere, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Thinking, what, I marked that down, but everything looks good.
And then I did have a question on, I don't know if I'm maybe rushing down too far, but on the storm response tree removal, it was left as the same as the
Page number?
2018. I just went between the two, hold on. It's under security.
$36.
Yep, 36.
I was getting there. I noticed that you had made, on the summary that you had done, that stays, and it stays the same as it did in 2018, from one year to the next.
That's correct.
Did we were we under on that, over on that this year? When we did our trees?
So we have hazard tree removal in a different location, which is mandated by the association. This is storm response tree removal, and so it's one of those things that we do not know how to predict, because you don't know if you're going to get one, and you don't know if you're going to. And so in the past, we've put some money in there, but if it's a huge storm, we have to go to UDR.
Okay, so that's where we move over to on that.
Right, so if you look on page 40, you'll see that we've got two different storm accounts in UDR. One is 9837 snow supplies. So you had almost 27,000 in 2016 and almost 37,000 in 2017.
Okay.
And then you had a big storm in 2015 at GL 9851 for 33,000. So storms are expensive.
I just want to make sure, in only doing what we did in 2018, that we're looking at having enough, considering
This is,
And what we've been
this is jump
looking at.
money. This is, if you have a problem, go jump on the problem. And if it's gonna be a bigger storm, I have to pick up the phone, the GM has to pick up the phone and call the treasurer and say, I'm gonna need you to release UDR money. This is where we have.
And by the way, I don't release UDR money without the executive committee or the full board.
you don't just do it over the phone.
No. Although he says to me, should I go hire the guy? I said, go hire the guy. Kai can't get out of his driveway, or his car is crushed by a tree from our property. You gotta do it. You just have to.
It just seemed like there was a lot of talk about that last year with everything, so.
It's a business reality,
Yeah.
but like a lot of other expenses of that type, don't budget for it and set money aside. Have money kept in UDR and reserve,
Nope,
and then
that makes
address it.
sense. Gotcha.
We only planned on 10 housing starts last year.
Yes, we did.
Is that what we're planning again this year? I've just, what was it, 27.5?
That's
Yeah.
what's included in
Yeah.
2019,
Okay.
yes, 10 housing
Okay.
starts.
We're at 35 now.
I know. You said that. I think,
I'm interviewing another contractor to take over part of John's job.
oh, good. 200. Good. Okay, which, by the way, doesn't cost us any
Builders pay
more
for
because
it.
the builders pay for their
We
Property
services.
owners pay for it.
Well, the property owner pays for it, yes, in their property. But the builder puts the money down as a
It's part of your cost of your, or
cost of
building.
their being able to
But it's
build.
not spread out over the entire association, so it's a targeted cost.
Yeah. And it helps pay Jessica's salary a little bit. Well, lot this year.
Hate it.
This year it did.
Paid
It
it.
really did, yeah.
Well, I've been through all this. I don't have any more questions.
I do.
Okay,
Get snappy.
All right.
You're not on the
we-
basketball
We
court.
talked about, I'll hip check. On page 28.
Of 46.
Yeah, 28 to 46, payroll and benefits salaries, 2019 budget, is that number going to change based on our?
Slow down, please. Page 28 of what? Okay.
Now, which number,
28.
which
Middle,
GL?
5,300 salaries, under payroll and benefits. It's, 2019 budget says 244, 199.
Yeah, that was the number she just gave us a change in.
The copy that you have before you includes that additional maintenance person, and it includes the swing shift security guard.
That all goes.
That
But
goes down
this-
to 204, 159.
This projection removes them.
Right, okay.
So
Okay.
I
We'll just
want
edit
to
that.
You have to
yeah,
update this.
confirm, yes, that I am gonna remove those two positions and update the detail by department.
Now,
Right.
so that 240, the 244 didn't include the security person, that's on
No,
a
that's
different
under
page.
your,
Okay.
that's under your.
So that will reduce, correct. The security guard is included.
7097.
7095.
Yeah. 97,
095.
ACC and security.
Professional security services,
Regulatory,
CNR's mandates.
yep, 7097. So
Oh,
that
I
will
was
also
under maintenance.
decrease.
Okay,
It
you're
will be
right.
180, it'll be the same as 2018, 185, 16T. We're not expecting an increase in that contract.
Got it.
Yeah, we
How
just
often is
re-signed
that
that contract
negotiated?
this year.
You
How
did?
often is that negotiated?
3 years. I think it's 3, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, but we just re-signed this year.
Okay. With no inflation clause or anything like that, or?
Those are my only snappy questions, Colin.
Thank you.
Is it snappy enough for you? Okay, this is the same as last year, 90.
So the projections for the total for the year end are based on how many through the end of July plus last year's August through December actuals?
Oh, yeah, so I should clarify that these, the 2018 projected is through 6/30, through June 30th. And then, the actuals are through June 30th, the projected is July through December.
And the projected, as we talked last week, is not really a forecast. It's not a manual forecast.
It's a calculated, it's a
Calculated projection.
it's a machine calculated projection based on where we are so far. Yeah.
But it's not updated monthly as a forecast.
Now, I'd like to show, though, that Jennifer did make that correction on page 40 that you're talking about with the hazardous tree removal. Last week, we talked about how it projected the 31,000
Yeah.
actual to the end of
Yeah.
the year, 65,000. Now that's actually been corrected.
Yeah.
So I corrected that and the SGM
Okay,
amount,
got it,
page 40.
got it. So it's an actual forecast as opposed, an actual projection as opposed to a calculation.
Short of having another nasty.
It's more of a
one.
real forecast, yeah. Okay, so any other comments or questions about? All right, so there were 3 items that I thought were brought up, okay? One was the recycling, which we haven't, Colin made a comment about it. I haven't heard from anybody else speaking about it. We suggested adding 50,000 for the GM salary for 2019, and then to reduce expenses for the pools by 2%.
Based on the 91% collection.
Yeah, based on, okay, that's right, whatever it
Whatever
requires.
the
Yeah,
difference is.
whatever's required to hit the 91% projection commitment. Okay,
Now, I have a question about the pools. Maybe I didn't pay attention to all the discussion, but the pools and rec, that's all already taken care of in the special assessment.
yes, but as Jennifer was saying, it was based on a 93% collection rate, and the
Okay.
Finance Committee is recommending
Understood.
adjust it.
Yep, I get it now.
To a 91%.
Yep.
Is everybody, nobody has a problem with that? Okay. Everybody's okay on the GM salary increase of 50? No?
I vote. Yeah, I mean, I believe it's, you just.
I mean, really.
Well, we're not increasing the GM
We're
salary
not,
by
we're gonna
50.
put
No,
an
that's not what
amount
we're-
in,
50,000?
50,000
a
over and
flat
above,
line number.
into the salaries,
Salary.
just to,
So that'll affect
Taxes,
taxes.
tax
Taxes
and
and
salary
salaries, right.
increase to total $50,000.
Right,
Combination.
right.
Benefits is a wash.
Okay, we're clear there.
yeah.
And if we can hire somebody for half of that, I'll be happy.
If they're
That's
com-
not
if
what
they're
we're talking
com-
about
If
here.
they're competent.
That's not what we're
I was
talking
gonna
about.
say,
We could easily hire
Why?
someone for half that.
I think we could hire somebody for half that, I could do it for half that, but you won't like what you see.
Right. No, that's not what we're talking about here, though.
Okay.
This is about budgeting.
All right, the only thing that's, I think, in the air is the recycling. Are we comfortable with 7,000 for recycling? Do we think we should wait a year? What's
Well-
your thought process?
We have a resident expert here, don't we?
Who's that?
I think that personally, we should be recycling. I think it's a responsibility. I hear it all of the time. I've seen it on social media. I've heard it from people. Why don't we have those? I think that it's a really good thing to have. Personally, it's my competitor that we're going to be giving the money to, so there's that.
Okay, you can recuse yourself from this conversation then.
Given that it is a competitor though, I personally would advocate for recycling all day long, regardless.
So you're for recycling, leaving the 7,000 in?
Part of our vision.
It is
Part of our vision, okay, then Penny's for it. Rick, Tony, I know
Well-
you're against it.
No, I'm not against it.
Oh, you're not?
I'm fine,
Oh,
yeah.
You're fine with it?
So
Okay.
do
I
we,
misunderstood
Okay.
what we were spending money on.
is this something that we need to vote on?
No, I'm
This is-
just making sure that we have consensus about what we're asking Jennifer to work
Yes,
on in
I-
the budget.
I
okay?
think that-
Because if we're going to recommend this budget, we need to recommend it with the changes that we all agree on. That's all I'm saying.
So we're not gonna recommend this until after Jennifer puts all the right numbers in.
We could, but I'd like to take it to the board tomorrow night.
Oh,
Well,
And
the
I don't
board-
know what-
The board won't vote on it.
They
tomorrow
won't vote on it tomorrow night, but I want them to see it, and I think it would be good, even though she may not get those changes
For us
in
to
for
recommend
tomorrow
it.
night. I think it still would be good for them us to recommend it with those changes. Is that,
Have we even voted on a motion of the 91% or?
Yes, that was a part of the structure of
The
the
structure.
I never got that.
the part,
that
the
was the
second option.
structure
Okay,
was
back to
91%.
Tabled that motion.
But the 91% we tabled, there were
Okay,
two
okay.
different motions.
Point of information, staff will state what has
Thank you.
happened.
Okay. Do you want me to go through what you guys did?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first motion, Rick Ray moved to accept the 91% as the assumption of the collections rate for 2019. Paul seconded the motion. The motion was subsequently tabled when Penny Carter motioned to table the topic. Actually, and I don't know.
Yes,
Said was
tabled it.
announced by
Yep,
acclamation.
yep.
Then Calamaro moved to approve option 2 structure as the 2019 budget recommendation to the board of directors. Eric seconded the motion. It was approved. 5 in favor, 1 opposed. That's what happened.
Okay, so the structure's approved, the 91%
1% is
wasn't
not
approved.
approved.
That
Okay.
was my point.
Okay, you got it. I apologize, you're right. I was thinking it was part of this
We're right, Rick.
structure, but it wasn't. Good job.
His due structure is based on a
It is.
91%.
Yeah,
Yes, it
But
is.
that structure can be 93.
It could be
90,
changed,
It could be anything.
yes.
I
You're
but we
right.
need it.
We said the numbers could be changed.
Yeah.
All right, so Jennifer,
So to bring forward to the board tomorrow, I can re-prepare what's on page 1, showing the different percentages for what the dues would
This?
be. No, just this, what's on page 1.
oh,
The one you did last,
Right,
Okay.
but, so using the structure in option 2,
okay,
re-prepare the schedule at the various
with the
collections
various collections rates?
percentages.
Okay.
And bring that back to finance.
Well, then we should vote on the tabled motion.
Sure.
It says
Yeah.
that we also,
Yeah.
Call that question?
well, we need to
We need to
take it off the table, and
Yeah,
so
bring it
I'd make,
back.
who made that motion?
Actually, it was Penny's to
No, you
table
want
it.
I just said move to take it off the table.
Okay,
Yep.
bring it back. All right, is there a second?
Yeah,
to bring it back.
Okay, it's back. Okay, so now discussion. 91%, is that a recommended level that we want to recommend to the board?
yes, we've talked about it.
call the question.
Okay, call the question. Those in favor of recommending 91%, that is 100%. Okay.
united front.
Now, nobody seconded Penny's tabling the motion.
Yes, Eric did.
Did you?
Eric did, yes.
Then he's,
He did.
okay.
Okay. Then the third item, before we go forward, I want to make sure we say, we're not dealing with the recycling, that's nothing, no change there. But we're going to recommend or have Jennifer add in $50,000 worth of salary and expense for the possible new GM salary, and then reduce the expenses to accommodate to the 91% level in pools
Right,
only.
and we don't need to
The
vote on
pool
any of
thing.
that.
No, we don't need to vote on it, so we've just given her the structure. Now, do we want to recommend the operations budget to the board?
Based on those changes.
Yes. Yes, okay.
moved.
You moving? Tony has
I
moved?
actually had one more question that
Oh,
I
yes,
wanted
please.
clarification on.
Can we get a second?
I'm so sorry.
Hold on, can we get a second so we can talk about it? So is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Penny.
Sorry.
All right, so Tony,
I'm trying to catch up as quickly as I can. So Tony's moving.
we want to go home,
I know,
so do you.
Hey, I get it, but I want to get it right for you guys.
Okay, so
Okay.
Tony has recommended that we recommend the operations budget with the changes Jennifer will make to the board. Okay,
And that's,
Penny seconded.
admin salary for the GM, cutting the pool expenses by 2%, removing the maintenance person and the swing chef
oh, yes,
security
that's
guard.
right. And,
And the whole thing at 91% collections.
And the recycling.
There's no
no,
change.
there's no change
Oh,
to
sorry,
recycling.
sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's no
unless I
change to that.
misunderstood.
Yeah, so those are the
I
three
did.
items. Have we caught you up? Okay, and Penny seconded. Okay. Now,
Paula.
I had one more question
Yes,
that I
Paula.
had circled that I forgot to ask about.
Okay,
I apologize.
good.
On page 47, under contracted and professional services, I just kind of wanted to make sure we had enough money actually in the 2019 budget. It looks like that went from some pretty huge numbers in actuals in 2015, 2016, 2017. We budgeted way low this year and we're way over the projected, and maybe that's just coming out in how the weird projection goes, but it looks like we bumped back down to 20,000, which is lower than it's ever been.
Page 47, show, oh, you're
Second one
talking about
down.
other professional services, okay.
And so
yeah,
for
we can
next
talk
year, it's
about that.
Considerably less than it
Yeah.
has ever been, so I just wanted to,
Yeah.
So in 2015, you'll notice if you go look at salaries, that salaries are low. And that's because the staff was new in 2015, and so we hired all of our staff, or a good portion of our staff, from professional service companies to make sure that they would work out.
The
In
option-
2016 and again in 2018, I had a baby. And so
Okay, so
we,
that's-
we hired an interim accounting manager. It gets billed there to other professional services. And then in 2017, we had trouble retaining some of our maintenance staff members for our seasonal staff members, and so we had to go to a professional services company. So then that would be offset in salaries. We'd budget it in salaries, but the actual expense occurred in other professional
it's just
services.
an anomaly, so I was
Yep.
just looking
Yeah,
for
no,
Yeah,
it's a
great
good, that's a
question.
good question. It was a good question.
Really good
Yeah,
question.
Definitely, good, all right. Any other questions before we call a question? All right, very good. Those in favor of recommending the ops budget as per the recommended changes to the board signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unanimous. Any other business to bring to us tonight?
Yes.
Quick question, I know I keep doing this.
No,
but
it's
So the next steps with this are going to be, you guys are gonna talk about it tomorrow, and then we're gonna come back
We're
and
gonna
look at
introduce it
numbers
tomorrow, right?
next week,
Uh,
2 weeks?
Well, I'm going to leave that to discussion right now because first of all, I'm going to be gone starting Friday until the 5th of September. So, and that doesn't mean I can't attend by phone, but my schedule is pretty open from that standpoint. Do you all feel a need to meet again and go through the numbers again? Do you want to see, Jennifer can send out her recommended changes. I suggest that we wait until after the board meeting tomorrow night and see what the board's reaction is to what we have. We may be given some different marching orders. I have no idea what they might say, based on what we've seen and what we've been poring over for the last week and a half.
So if that's the case, when's the early, if we waited until you came back, would that have an adverse impact on getting this out?
We can meet in the interim if we need to. I'm not sure if we, and I don't know what else the staff might have to bring to us. I do know that there is an air conditioning problem that has reared its ugly head again at the clubhouse, and so we may have a need for some immediate emergency funds there. Whether or not that's going to require the finance committee, I think it may end up being an executive committee decision and ratified by the board at some point, because it's going to be fast, have to be fast. Don't know. Yes,
There's $80,000 included in the SURF budget that we previously discussed in 2018 for
And
the
the board-
HVAC system.
And everyone said, this is the SURF plan, we approved it, now it would have to come in, but that item was in there.
so we may not have to approve anything then.
Well, the
Oh,
board would
and-
still have to.
The board has to approve
The
it,
actual project needs to be
Yes.
approved with bids.
But the finance
of course,
committee wouldn't.
but we don't have the bids yet, which you're getting.
Right.
So,
But it is
just
in
to
the
remind
budget.
you, I copied you and Eric as I was soliciting corporations to come in. One company responded of the three that I went to. I went to three large companies, and only one company wanted to provide a bid.
What I would do is in your funding request, when you come forward, just list the two that failed to respond, so that we say that's why we only have one.
All right?
Okay, that's
Is
good.
there, are there more that we can contact?
I kept contacting them. I
Different
went to
ones?
some of the largest ones.
You need HVAC? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, I went to some very large companies, and they all walked the job.
They all what?
They walked.
They came
the
out
job.
and looked at the job.
Oh.
They
and
toured the
still
job, walked the job,
never
I'm gonna get that
responded.
number to you, I'm gonna get that number to you.
They never did.
I'm gonna get that number to you. And right now, just to get that, the project completed is 8 to 12 weeks out.
Will you gonna forward me the information? I can send it to the HVAC company we use,
Which company do you use?
Valley Plumbing and Electric.
I'll just call Valley Plumbing and Electric.
Okay?
Okay, good. Excellent.
So where are we on the meeting thing? I kind of got lost.
I'm waiting.
We don't know if we're going to need
I don't know
another.
that we'll need another one this month, and the earliest might be in September. Now, here's what I will tell you is,
Or doesn't the board have to be complete by the 14th?
the board has to make their decision by, we're hoping, mid-September. It's gotta be, because it's gotta be mailed out.
And we have not made a dues recommendation yet. That's still under discussion, correct?
Well, we've made a recommendation for the structure.
Yes, right,
Yeah.
but not a dues
But
rec.
for the actual amount, no, because we're still putting numbers together. But I think we have a general
I mean, I think we have a
ballpark
general
idea.
idea. I don't think it's gonna
Ballpark
be a,
idea. But that
we're
has
gonna have to
got,
have
that
our meeting,
has got to be a the budget must be approved by the board, but it can't be approved too soon. The earliest would be the 5th, is it, of September?
The earliest is, yes, the 5th.
5th?
But the
And-
latest is like the 14th, is that right?
Something
No,
like-
the latest isn't the 14th.
the
Where
29th.
Where we're looking at the latest right now is based on the mailing thing.
Right, well, that's
And
what
so-
I'm asking, so.
It's the printing, guys.
Yeah, the printing, the printing.
Yeah, we gotta get
And
things
so,
sorted.
So what's the drop dead date? That's the thing that I don't understand. Hello? Who
That-
has that?
I say mid-September.
It's-
Yeah.
We have all of the.
What does that mean?
blank-
that
What
it's
does that
done being
mean?
printed?
It has to be
No, that
approved.
It's ready to be
It's
sent
ready
to
to be
the
sent to the
printer and
printer.
approved, and
Yeah.
all of the measures and all
So
of the
decisions need to be made before then. Here's a recommendation I have, is that whenever the board is meeting for their final decision and to approve the final budget, is maybe we have a combined finance committee and board meeting together and have that discussion at the same time so that we can, now, if you feel a need to meet sooner, to provide additional recommendations to the board, I think you've pretty much gone through everything.
So that's, are you thinking then the week of the 10th? I'm just trying to understand what the timeline is here. And mid-September has a lot of interpretations.
I know, I can let you know better tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't think that I have an answer to that right now, but I'm thinking probably the 10th.
So
Yeah,
you're not-
the week of the 10th.
And you're not available next week. I'm not available next week. And I can't even call in, so,
Well,
Recommend the 10th, week of the 10th.
the week of the 10th, I think, is going to be fine unless we have some emergent issue that we need to pull together for some reason otherwise.
We have a finance meeting already set for the 12th.
Yeah, we do. That's our typical meeting. So I'm going to say our next meeting. Oh,
Actually,
no, it's not the 12th? No, it wouldn't be. It's the 19th. But we may make it the 12th or the 13th if that's the board meeting.
That is the
date.
board meeting. Thursday the 13th is the board meeting.
Which
The second Thursday of the month.
sounds like, I think that might be the plan. The only thing would be, we still may need to do the 19th if we have a funding request or two. We'll
They
let,
would be ratifications, wouldn't they?
I don't know. You would have to tell me.
I don't know yet.
That's
Okay.
a month away.
Yep.
So,
But I think we have time to think about it, because today is only the 22nd, so, okay? All right, Penny, are you good with that? I'll let you know, but let's
That's
plan on the
fine.
13th.
I just
Plan on
want
the
to make sure that
13th.
we're all on the same page. where it was about-
12th, no, the 13th is a
Go for
Thursday.
it combined.
Combined meeting, the 13th, Thursday the 13th. Okay? If we need one sooner, I will get to you as soon as I can.
Great.
All right, so that's the end of the next meeting. All right, next on our agenda is the mission statement. Penny, I'm going to let you have this conversation about this. Do you,
Well, this is the Sudden Valley Community Association Missions and Vision Statement that was done, I believe, in the
Microphone, please.
2002 to 2004 kind of timeframe. And so this is the only one that I'm aware of that there was broad community association involvement in, not just board, it was quite large effort in the community plan that was put forth back then. So I made the request that we take a look at that and that the board and the finance committee use that as a guideline and a guidepost for making decisions as we are looking at things like recycling or new buildings or parking lots for the marina or fixing the marina or following up any of the decisions that we're making, that this ought to be a stake in the ground that we refer back to, and that we ought to be opening our meetings or at least referring back to it at both the board level and the finance committee level, the communications committee, all of the committees in the organization, I think, should be using it, so.
So on the copy that we have, it says in 2015. So was this re-looked at and re-agreed to, or
No.
in
It-
15?
The document was put together as a visionary statement. 10 years from now,
Okay, in
this is what
2015,
we
this is
want our
who we will be.
community to
Right.
be.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay,
Vision.
right.
so this truly was a long-range planning committee that got some
Absolutely.
things done.
It was multiple years, and there was
Several hundred people.
involved in this process. So it's like, gosh, we did all of that effort, and there was a whole lot of people in the community that
Okay,
did
so are
that.
you making a motion for the finance committee to recommend to the board?
Is that appropriate for something like this?
On our
I mean,
agenda?
It doesn't seem
It's
like
not-
that's the appropriate.
Well,
way to handle
it's
it.
not a finance committee thing, but it does speak to the, I guess, the
I would-
undercurrent of everything.
Well, okay, can I ask a question?
Yes, you
on
may.
this? Because, so we're going to have to change this vision because it's no longer 2015. So are we going to say in 2025, or what are we going to say here? And the other thing is, if we do a futuristic, I wouldn't have a problem with the statement where it says our infrastructure has kept pace with the growth, because our infrastructure has not kept pace with the growth. If it's our vision that it will keep pace with the growth.
That's what the
you don't
vision
need-
is.
You don't need a,
Well,
you don't need a
speak-
date.
Well, you speak, when you write a vision, you speak as if it is true. So you don't say it might, it will, it shall. You speak.
We want it to be.
You want it to
or-
be.
yeah.
This is how,
This is
this
how it
is
is.
how we will be operating. This is what we will be. So it is, here's our vision. Here's what we look like, walk like, talk like. That's how you create a vision statement. So that's how that was created in 2005, to say, this is the vision of our community in 2015. This is what it will be. And so it was written as if it existed. So it was written as if it was in present tense. So, and that's just what you do when you do visions. So relative to where the board wants to take this as far as updating it and doing it in a long-range plan, but this is, how are we doing against this? Because as best as I can tell, the board has ignored this for the last 10 years and 13 years. And so I'm saying, where are we? This was our vision. There was, the next step in this process back in 2005 was to have the board and have a strategy put forth by the board. And it's fallen on deaf ears every year, it seems like. And it's a shame to have our community members put that much effort into it and not have it be acknowledged and looked at as being a stake in the ground in the direction that we wanted to go. So I don't know whether or not that's a recommendation, whether or not that's something that we would vote on here and do. It's just something that I believe that we should be, it's something that was put forth, and it's just part of what we should be doing in the way that we operate the business.
what I'd like to do is share this with the board president, who happens to be in the audience, but he also happens to chair the long-range planning committee, and I think it would be a good basis for one of their first meetings to discuss.
May I speak to you?
Yes.
Hold on, please.
Oh, you need to get him a microphone. Okay, so I think we're kind of morphing into the audience. Yeah, yeah.
For the camera. Yeah, I'll speak to that.
Go that way then.
All right. There's.
Go back to your seat.
For purposes that Penny has described, we don't need to do anything else with this. Now, for purposes of revising it and updating it, yeah, absolutely goes to long-range planning. That's not a problem. Penny's original purpose was to suggest a way of handling this work product from an earlier era. And you guys are perfectly free to make any kind of recommendation to the board because, and particularly because, if I understand what you were saying correctly, it's a guidepost for making spending decisions. And that is exactly what the finance committee is supposed to do. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to vote, make a recommendation, or not vote, whatever.
My thought is that this is a great touchstone for us to consider in all of our work. And I think that if we resolved as a committee to focus on this as a part of our job, then it might be a good example to other committees and the board. But that might be a good place to start, is if we think that this is a good touchstone for us to use in our work, it's a start. And if we want to recommend to the board that they take it up, I think that's a good thing too. But I wouldn't recommend that they take it up if we're not going to put our hearts into it.
Well, I think it's being willing to say this was accepted by the community. This was worked on by hundreds of people. This was put together as where we wanted to go, and until we're given different direction, this is something that has stood for a long time. Whether or not it's been followed or read, that doesn't mean that it has not been adopted at some point, and until something else is presented to us. To me, this, as our mission and our vision, is our marching orders in how we make decisions in the community for our financial decisions.
So simply reaffirm and recognize.
I think reaffirming and recognizing that this has already been done, and
I think beyond that.
We look at it.
3 years ago, we asked the board, we make a recommendation, and we made a motion that the board develop a long-range plan to give us some direction as to what we should do with our assets and our community. And as Penny brought up, we had that set up some time ago. But as any person that's been in charge of anything in the past, a vision is worthless if you put it in the desk drawer and you forget about it. So unless you have some metrics and some goals that represent whether you're achieving your vision or not, you never
getting
know.
nods
And
from
you
David
totally
over
lose
there.
track of where you're going. And obviously, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
Well, we've asked for this year. I mean, just since the time that I've been on the finance committee, we've asked for this information, this direction, as we make financial decisions and as we look at where we're going and how do we apply our time and energy. We've asked exactly for this, and it's been there the whole time.
So do we need to make a motion, or?
Just to point out, it's already in the board packet.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I mean, it's just, do we make a motion or do we just agree that, we've at least, ideally you would have metrics, but if you don't have, even if you don't have metrics, if you're not looking at this to say, just to read to say, to check, are we making decisions that are in alignment with this and support this? Or are we not even considering it, which is, I believe, what we've been doing? And so to start at least checking to see, are we in alignment with this is a great first step. And then you can take it further from there. But it's just, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us use this in a more proactive way to do it as a test of the decisions that we're making and as the stuff that we're putting forth for the community. And it's also a justification for some of the expenditures that we have, like recycling, for instance.
I would think that we would want to, at least once a year, maybe at the beginning of each year, that we have this in our packet, so that all new members of the finance committee see it, and it's put in front of us, so we don't lose it, because we've definitely lost this. So.
I have never seen it before, so.
I've never seen it. But
You've
if we-
never seen it?
No, I've never seen it.
Yes.
I'd love to see it on our website.
But if we do it at least on a yearly basis, so that we know what our goal is.
I have no problem. I've worked with mission statements in many companies, especially my last one, and every decision we made was, does it follow our mission? And I'm happy to include this as part of our discussion process for the rest of this year, which isn't much. There's only a couple more meetings left, but I'm happy to do that. And I certainly will have a comment.
And that's the important thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll have that comment at the meeting for the.
I don't think we need a motion or a vote or anything, because then I'd ask for a motion on, shall we follow the RCWs?
Right.
And,
Yeah, and we could be in a long conversation on that.
yeah, so.
Okay. All right, so if there is no further business to be brought to the board, I am opening it up for member questions and comments. And here is yes, Mr. Flacco, if you will wait, please. Hold it, wait. Yes, you have to do it the right way. There you go.
Doesn't vision say what we want to see in the future?
It's stating how we see ourselves in the future, yes.
How do you have a vision statement when you're making statements like, has maintained, that means it was, and our infrastructure has kept pace, I mean it was. So how can you have a vision when you're talking about it was and it has been?
It hasn't.
It should be kept in, like Sudden Valley, our neighbors are diverse, safe, that's cool. Has maintained, will maintain in that procedure. I can't see how it can be a vision statement when you're quoting things that has been done.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Nick, and that's kind of the wording of a mission statement, so good point. but it's kind of how it goes.
Give it to Linda, she wants to
There you
talk.
go. Linda wants to chat.
David does.
No, David wants to chat. Yes. And David, name and address.
David Narcico, 15 Bramble Way. Just my compliments on option 2 is pretty much in line with what I had presented for that 7%.
It is, isn't it?
What I had assumed that the first month or the first year would be like 50% and then 7% thereafter. This was 6 percentage points below on the first year and then 6 percentage points above on the second. So for all practical purposes, this is pretty much in line
Much
with
what you were thinking.
that's
Good.
what was my thoughts.
Good.
So this is working very nicely in line with that.
That's
Thank you
great.
very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you just wanting to take credit?
No, no. I'm not.
It's her work.
I'm thanking.
It's Jennifer's work.
You listen, we all listen.
Yes.
I really appreciate, that's what I'm saying. I really appreciate the effort that went into that. I think it's reasonable.
We got you. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Anyone
All
else?
right, any others? All right, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
Motion.
moved.
Yep. Second.
We're done. Thank you, everybody, at 9:01.